You were just a child when it came. The sky did not tear open. No trumpet sounded from the heavens. There was only a profound and sudden silence. The birds stopped singing. The wind held its breath. Every machine on the planet simply paused. You stood in your yard, a toy rocket in your hand. You looked up like everyone else. Something vast and wrong was blotting out the sun. It was a shadow that fell from nothingness. It did not burn or scream through the air. It descended with an unnatural grace. A pillar of black stone, perfectly smooth, impossibly large. It settled into the great Mesa Desert. It made no crater. It displaced no dust. It was simply there, a new and terrible mountain. Your childhood ended that day. The toy rocket fell from your fingers. The age of wonders was over. The age of orders had begun. For years it stood there, silent and cold. Humanity circled it like a curious animal. We sent probes that never returned. We sent soldiers who never fired a shot. They just stood before its obsidian face and wept. The stone did nothing. It simply watched, or so it felt. It radiated a quiet that was louder than any sound. It was the quiet of a parent watching a child, a parent who was not pleased. Then the words appeared. They bloomed across the surface like frost. A language no one had ever seen. It was all angles and elegant lines. Our best minds dedicated their lives to it. They were the code breakers of a generation. They sought a greeting, a warning, a story. They were looking for a conversation. They found a command. The first translation came on a Tuesday. The world held a collective breath. The message was simple. You will be quiet. More came after that. An entire list of rules, an instruction manual for our species. We were not to travel beyond our moon. We were not to build weapons of great power. We were not to alter our own biological form. The rules were precise, absolute, and unfeeling. They were not suggestions. They were the words of a God who did not care for our worship. It cared only for our obedience. The experts who translated it felt a chill. This was not first contact. This was an inheritance of chains. We learned the name they called themselves, the Wardens, or the closest translation. They had watched us for a long time. They saw our wars, our noise, our chaos. They saw us reaching for the stars, and they decided we were not ready. The stone was our teacher, our jailer. Its words were law, and for a time, we obeyed. We were children who had been scolded. We were afraid of the hand that could fall from the sky. So we put away our rockets. We dismantled our weapons. We learned to live in the silence they commanded. A strange peace fell upon the world. The wars stopped. The shouting faded. The old hatred seemed small beneath the stone's shadow. It was a golden age bought with our freedom. We had food. We had comfort. We had art. Of a kind. Everything was safe. Everything was permitted, except ambition. The stars were no longer our destination. They were just a painted ceiling, a beautiful reminder of the cage we now lived in. You grew up in this quiet world. You learned the history of the coming. You read the translations of the stone's laws. It was called the Mandate of Silence. A century passed. Generations were born and died in this peace. It began to feel less like a gift. It started to feel like a prison. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was the silence of a held breath. The silence of a creature waiting to strike. People forgot the fear. They only knew the cage. They saw the beautiful stars at night. They felt a longing they could not name. It was the ghost of our own future, a future that had been stolen from us. You felt it too, a fire in your gut, an anger that had nowhere to go. This peace was a lie. This safety was a leash. Humanity was not meant for a golden cage. It was meant for the endless dark between worlds. You knew then you would not die in this silence. You were a student of light, a physicist. You worked with photons and focused energy. You understood that light could carry a message. It could be a whisper across a great distance. The wardens had ordered us to be quiet. They had forbidden radio. They had forbidden starships. But they had said nothing about light, nothing about art. It was a loophole, a tiny crack in the stone wall of their law. An idea took root in your mind. A beautiful, terrible, unforgivable idea. You would not speak with words. You would not use radio waves. You would use the canvas of space itself. You would write a message for everyone to see. A message for the unseen wardens. You would use the one thing they could not forbid, the light of our own sun. You gathered a small team, other quiet rebels, scientists and artists who felt the same fire. You told them your plan. They thought you were insane. And then they smiled. For the first time in years, they truly smiled. The plan was elegant in its audacity. You would use a fleet of old solar sails. They were relics from before the coming, decommissioned, forgotten, drifting in high orbit. To the wardens, they were just junk. To you, they were a paintbrush. Each sail could be tilted, angled perfectly. It could reflect a beam of sunlight. It could become a single pixel of light in the sky. With enough sails, you could create an image, a message in reflected starlight. The work was done in secret. You and your team used encrypted channels. You repurposed old satellite control systems. You wrote new code in the dead of night. Each sail was a sleeping giant. You had to awaken them one by one. You had to teach them a new dance, a ballet of light and shadow. It was a crime that had no name, a defiance seen by no one. Yet, you felt a thrill you had never known. It was the thrill of a child breaking a rule set down by a silent God. The first message was simple, a perfect circle. It appeared in the night sky for 17 seconds, a new star that bloomed and then vanished. It was visible only to those who knew where to look. Your team watched from a dozen hidden observatories. You held your breath. The circle was a symbol of unity, of wholeness. It was the first word in a conversation we were not allowed to have. It was a secret crime, a beautiful flare of rebellion in the dark. We had answered their stone with our own light. We waited. The circle had been our first pebble, a small ripple in their silent pond. We expected a response, any response, a change in the stone's text, a subtle shift in orbital patrols, something to tell us they had seen. We received nothing. The stone remained dark. The sky remained empty of their ships. The silence from our ancient wardens was absolute. And that was more terrifying than any threat. Was it a test? Did they think our little circle was an accident? A random glint of sunlight on space debris? Or was our defiance so small, so pathetic, that it was beneath their notice? That thought was the most chilling of all, that we could shout, and they would not even hear. The silence was a challenge, a dare. It pushed your team to be bolder, to create something they could not ignore. The age of quiet whispers was over. It was time to shout. Our art grew. The next message was not a simple shape. It was a sprawling, complex pattern, a fractal of impossible beauty. We used hundreds of sails. The light show lasted for a full minute. We painted the night with swirling geometries. We sent them the very soul of mathematics, a universal language they had to understand. This was not a random glint of light. This was design. This was intelligence. This was humanity saying, "We are still here." We kept sending our replies. We sent them art. We depicted the shape of our own galaxy. We showed them the double helix of our life code. We recreated the works of our greatest masters. We sent our soul out past the forbidden frontier. Each message was a crime of beauty, a protest written in photons. We were shouting art into the great void. And still, the wardens were silent. We wondered if they even cared. Perhaps they were just watching, like a biologist watching a petri dish. But someone else was watching. Humanity. People on the ground saw the lights. At first they were dismissed as strange auroras, but the patterns were too perfect. The messages began to spread online. Secret forums buzzed with theories. Some saw hope in the lights. They saw a sign that we were not broken, that our spirit of defiance still burned. They called themselves the children of the sky. They saw us as heroes. Others saw only danger. They saw a child taunting a giant. They believed the peace was worth the price. They feared the warden's wrath. They argued that these sky artists were risking everything, that they would bring ruin down upon us all. They called themselves the Stone Sworn. They preached compliance. They urged people to report anyone who spoke of the lights. Our silent protest had started a war of belief at home. The world split into two warring factions. Families were torn apart. Friendships ended. The Stone Sworn saw the Skywriters as traitors. The children of the sky saw them as cowards. The quiet world was quiet no longer. It was filled with angry whispers, with suspicion and fear. You had wanted to wake humanity up. You had not realized it would wake up screaming. The golden cage now had bars of our own making. One side feared the masters, the other side feared slavery more. Then they answered, not with words, not with light. They answered with a pebble cast from on high. It came from the outer darkness, a single asteroid, just 100 meters wide. It was not aimed at a city. That would have been too crude. It was aimed at the landing site of our first mission to Mars, a monument to a future we were denied, a place of pilgrimage for the dreamers. It struck with the force of 1,000 bombs. The impact was visible from Earth, a bright flash on the red planet's surface, a plume of dust that would scar it for centuries. No one was hurt. No one was killed. But the message was brutally clear. We see you. We know what you are doing, and we can erase you. It was a reminder of their power, a warning shot across the bow of our fragile rebellion. The skywriting stopped. The silence returned. This time, it was a silence of pure fear. The fear was a poison. The Stone Sworn felt vindicated. They said, "We told you so." The children of the sky fell quiet. Their hope had been struck from the sky. Your team was shattered. Some wanted to surrender, to confess. They believed we had pushed too far. They were ready to accept the cage. But you were not. The asteroid was not an execution. It was a negotiation. They were telling us the stakes. They were showing us their strength. Now, we had to show them ours. The final reply had to be undeniable. It had to be so grand, so permanent, that it could not be ignored. It had to be more than a fleeting image in the sky. It had to be a monument, an eternal statement of who we were. We would not write on the sky anymore. We would write on a world. The canvas would be an entire moon. Our masterpiece would be a dead rock hanging in space. We chose Charon, Pluto's largest moon. It was at the very edge of our system, a place of cold and darkness, a place forbidden by the mandate of silence. It was the perfect canvas, a blank slate waiting for a signature. The plan was terrifyingly ambitious. We would not paint it with light. We would carve it with fire. We would reshape its surface. We would turn a dead moon into a testament to our will, a message that would last for 1 billion years. The project was codenamed Prometheus, the bringer of fire. We gathered the last dreamers, the engineers and miners who still remembered how to build big things, the ones who had been grounded for a century. They came from every nation. They risked everything to join us. The secret project started at the system's edge. We built a hidden base on Pluto itself, a network of tunnels and habitats buried beneath the ice, far from the warden's watchful eyes. Every day was a race against discovery. We used repurposed asteroid miners, great, lumbering machines designed to chew through rock. We flew them out to Pluto under false flight plans. We told the world they were on debris cleanup missions. It was a lie on a planetary scale. We landed on Charon's dark side, the side that always faces away from the sun, and we began to dig. We were not building a city. We were building a sculpture. Our tools were fusion charges, controlled explosions that could vaporize ice and rock. We drilled deep into the moon's crust. We planted the charges with surgical precision, following a blueprint of breathtaking scale. We were drawing a picture with a chisel of nuclear fire. The work was slow and dangerous. A single mistake could alert the wardens. A single miscalculation could shatter the moon. We were insects carving our name on a mountain. You lived in the dark. For years, you and your team worked in the cold twilight of Pluto. You saw Earth as a distant, pale blue dot, a reminder of what you were fighting for. The isolation was immense. The pressure was unbearable. But the work continued. The carving took shape. A line here, a curve there, a pattern emerging from the frozen chaos. You were creating something the universe had never seen, a work of art on a celestial body. But the greatest danger was not from the sky. It was from within. You had a friend on the team, someone you had known since the beginning. Ilara, a brilliant strategist. She had helped plan the solar sail messages. She had been with you every step of the way. But the asteroid had broken something in her. She saw our grand project not as defiance, but as suicide. She believed we were signing humanity's death warrant. She tried to reason with you. She begged you to stop. She spoke of the peace, the safety. She said we were throwing it all away for pride. You told her it was not pride, it was survival, that a creature in a cage is already dead. The argument fractured your friendship. You saw fear in her eyes. She saw madness in yours. Trust was the price of our freedom, and that price was becoming too high. One day, she acted. She tried to send a message to the wardens, a warning signal from our hidden base. She planned to betray the entire project, to save humanity from itself. She was caught by your security team, just moments before the signal went out. You stood before her, the traitor who walked beside you. There was no anger in your heart, only a profound sadness. She had made her choice. You had to make yours. You could not risk the project. She was placed in confinement, a prisoner of the very freedom she feared. The work was almost done. The charges were all in place. The pattern was etched deep into Charon's crust. It was a massive, intricate spiral, a representation of our galaxy, and at its heart, a symbol for humanity. All that remained was the final act, the simultaneous detonation of every charge. It would flash melt the ice. It would create rivers of molten rock. The carved lines would glow with furious heat. We would write our name in fire. You stood on the command bridge on Pluto. The entire team was gathered. You looked at the image of Karen on the main screen. A quiet, dead moon. You thought of the century of silence, of the fear and the hope. You thought of Alara, locked away. You took a deep breath. This was it, the final reply, the last word in our argument with the heavens. You gave the order, ignite. A wave of light washed over the command bridge. The screens showed a star being born. Karen's surface erupted in a silent storm of fire. The carved channels filled with white-hot lava. The spiral blazed against the darkness of space. It was brighter than any star, a colossal work of art burning at the edge of our world. Our message blazed for all the stars to see. It said, "We are here, we are alive, and we are not afraid." Back on Earth, the great stone felt it. The energy release from Karen was immense, a shockwave traveling at the speed of light. The stone, which had stood silent for over a century, began to hum, a low, resonant sound that shook the ground. People came out of their homes, afraid. The stone-sworn fell to their knees in terror. The children of the sky looked up and wept with joy. The hum grew louder, deeper. Then, with a sound like grinding continents, a crack appeared. The single crack spiderwebbed across the black surface. The smooth obsidian face shattered into 1,000 pieces. But they did not fall. They hovered in the air, reforming. The old words, the mandate of silence, dissolved into dust. The air grew cold. A new message began to form on its surface. The letters were the same ancient script, but the words were different. The entire planet watched, holding its breath. The final judgment was at hand. The wardens did not send fire. They did not send asteroids. They did not answer our art with destruction. Their response was far more devastating, far more profound. The new words on the shattered stone were not a command. They were not a threat. They were a single question, a question that humbled our defiance, a question that changed our universe forever. The stone glowed with a soft, white light, and the words it showed were these: "Are you ready to talk now?